floor. Where there's concrete bases is where the tank would have sat. The furnace, even today, is basically an oblong box. You know, it's longer than it's wide. It has a batch end here and a working end here, and there's still the same configuration today. Underneath here, which I'll show you later, are the regenerator tunnels that were linked to the furnace via flue systems, 4 on each side, that came up here and into the furnace itself. And that's what allowed the gas and earth to enter the furnace. So down here, batch end, the silica, the soda ash, limestone that I mentioned earlier will be fed in to the furnace here at what we call the docket. So that will be fed into the 4 burners on that side. Will be firing across the batch. So it's material, it's powder, it's that kind of thing. We're firing across the batch, and as it fed in, it makes its way down along the furnace and will gradually melt down into molten glass. Now, if you're a glass person, you'll know what I'm going to say next. We don't call glass molten glass in the glass industry. Just to confuse non-glass people, we call it molten metal. There you go. So molten metal would by the time we get down here, would be turning to molten product. Where these chip people are stood now, the curved front of the furnace would be with 6 bolts in. Where this chap stood, you would have a gatherer blower who was a skilled. You want to come closer? Come under the core. It's all right. It won't collapse. Trust me. Yeah. Well. So, where I'm stood now, and these people and yourselves there, if we were here between 1886 and 1918, we'd be stood in about 2 foot of molten metal at this minute, which isn't very good for your legs. So as that product came down here, you would have a team of glass bottle makers. The most important being that artisan maker, the glass blower himself. And we all understand, the Victorian period and how it was bad for the working class, and it was. We know that, that generally things were bad. But these guys were artisans of the day. They were relatively well paid for the day, and the junior members of the team would aspire to become an artisan glass blower because of the pay and because of the respect that it brought. He would have his blow iron, and he would be stood about here. He would insert that in one of those portals, one of those 6 portals that I mentioned, those openings. He would insert that and get a gatherer glass on his blow iron. Something nowadays we tend to call it a gob, but it does fluctuate between gathering that. So we bring that out. He then put some air into it, start getting a bit of initial shape, which was something we still do again today. We call that parison, starting getting a parison shape. Bottles are made in 2 stages. They are today as they were then. So he'd work that, and then he'd work it on a marver. A marver was a piece of slate. So he'd start using that marver to just get an initial shape to it. Once he was satisfied with that, he would stand on a pedal, a blow mold, final blow mold would open the floor, he'd put it into the final blow mold, let it close, blow to the final shape. Right. Open the mold again, bring that out, and then pass the blow in out like that to a wetter off who's stood out there. Now, a wetter off was generally a 10, 11-year-old boy who was, just got into the glass trade. He was looking to make his way, and it was hard. It was hard work for them. But in my opinion, a very good use of 10 and 11-year-old boys. For me, you should bring it back very palatable. So the wetter off would flick a bit of cold water onto the end of the glass blower's blow iron and literally break that bottle off, because it was attached to it. Don't forget, he's been blowing it, so he would use cold water to break it off. He would then pass that to a glass finisher who sat just outside of him, and that glass finisher would put the finish on the bottle. So the finish is a screw of a bottle. So we infuse the finish to the bottle. We don't do that now. We form the finish along with that initial parison shape. We do that in one now. But back then, diffused and these finishes would have been produced via a small process. So once that was done, another 10 or 11-year-old lad who was called the taker in, for obvious reasons, I tell you, he would collect the bottles and he would bring them over here to these alps in the wall here. Yeah. This is where the annealing kilns were situated. So with glass, if you make something out of glass and you let it cool of its own accord, you can flick it and shatter it. Because the stresses that are built up in that glass, as soon as you flick it, it'll shatter. So what you've got to do is control the cooling of glass, let it cool down slowly, so all those stresses and strains come out of that glass and it's a usable product. So what we did, we put them in these annealing kilns here, which Cannington Shaw had a patent for. I've managed to say it, had a patent for, and you put them in there. They would be in there for 4 to 5 days, cooling down, while all that stress came out. Nowadays, we do that annealing process in about 25 minutes in a modern glass container plant. But that's technology for advancing. So they'd be all stacked in there. Once they'd had 4 or 5 days in there, they take them in, get them all out again, and take them down to the vaults below for storage and onward distribution to the Empire and beyond. So the cone that you see above, which is obviously the most spectacular part of the bottle shop, in my opinion, always served a purpose. With furnaces that had cones above them, it served to give a reverberatory effect. The reverberatory effect is heat fires up, the cone channels it, allows heat, allows fumes out, but then deflects heat back. So it helped to regulate furnace temperature, and that's why it's there. They were more important with the original cones. If you think about, everybody thinks about glass cones as those, like the front of the World of Glass. Anybody see bits of World of Glass? I mean, that one's only 20 years old, 25 years old. It was built as a Millennium Project, you know. But nevertheless, it's a great recreation of the first generation of glass cones. It moved on a bit to accommodate that oblong style of a more modern glass furnace. This furnace here, as I mentioned earlier, was 7 tons capacity. Nowadays, they're far bigger. The last furnace rebuild I worked on at Elton, near Chester, for Ensor, that's 900 tons. And it's currently the biggest bottle furnace in the world. So that gives you an idea. But what I always said to anybody, if I could borrow Doctor Who's TARDIS and go and collect John Shaw of Cannington Shaw, pick him up, take him to Elton, show him that furnace, he would know exactly how that was operated. He would recognise, because we operate on the same regenerative principle as this one did. We still do 140 years later. Now, I've got Glass Futures over the way though. I was part of the team who bringing Glass Futures here. That's to look at how we might do things moving forward. Because one of the things about glass is it's 100% recyclable. It's a great product. If we had the infrastructure in place, we could just collect glass and keep remelting. We wouldn't need new raw material, which would be much more efficient. We have tested at Pilkington and at Ensor down at Elton, firing on cullet alone. Cullet is what we call broken glass that we reuse. So we fired on 100% cullet, and it's perfectly feasible to do it over and over again. But there's just not the infrastructure in place to collect all that glass produced. So we still use raw material. So Glass Futures are going to look at what fuels we use. Greater emphasis on electricity, which we've done for decades anyway, but more efficient way of doing it. And of course, if you're going to use electricity, that electricity has got to be produced not by fossil fuels. It's got to be produced by climate-friendly processes. Look at the refractory materials we use. Refractories that we build furnaces from are extremely energy intensive. So how do we do that better? Look at biofuels and look at hydrogen. Hydrogen is a fantastic fuel for glass, and we have had a number of trials of late firing at Ensor and at Pilkington on hydrogen alone, and we've had great results from that. So that's the future of it. One of the things that I'm looking at for the bottle shop to try and give it a sustainable future is siting a combined heat and power unit here. If you don't know what a CHP is, it's basically an engine that you can produce heat and power from and supply the local business and domestic, neighbourhood with heat and power. The benefit of that would be an income tariff watch doing that. I've gone through the feasibility stage with it, and we're now at the commercialisation of that project as part of the St Helens district heat network. So that's more than likely going to go ahead, but it will be around 2030 that when hydrogen comes on stream in St Helens behind it, which is down at Elsby Port there. So that's a little bit of the future there. You can see the outer wall there in the Merseyside. We've only got 2 of them opened up at the minute. Eventually all of them will be opened up, but for the minute we've only got 2. Back when this was producing bottles, all of those were open. The brickwork only came in after it closed in 1918 as a bottle making facility, so they were only blocked up then. So all of those were open, and again helped to regulate furnace temperature. And you can imagine this was a real hot, hostile environment to work in. The openings there would be covered by canvas. As the seasons change, the winter would be fully closed, and then up for spring, etc., fully open, so helping to regulate that temperature. Any questions at this stage?
How long would it take them to use the 7 ton?
24 hours.
So was it like a batch process that they would feed
Well, it
the
wasn't
whole
a batch
furnace?
process, it's a continuous process.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So they would never stop firing?
No, you never stop firing. Once you build a furnace, you don't really want to stop it. You can slow them down, you can stream off and make those melt at a much smaller, much slower rate. But you never shut furnace down, not unless you want to collapse anyway, go cold and collapse.
It's like a steel furnace, like they never stop a steel furnace.
No, it's like it was in the news about all that fuss about the steelworks. It's the reason they didn't want them stopping is because they're knackered once you stop them. They go cold. When you build a furnace, you introduce the heat gradually, start warming it up, it expands. Like anything that's heated, it expands. And you'll see on the outside of the cone here, we've got tie rods. And there it's the same on a modern furnace. As it heats up, you let out those tie rods, and so it expands. But shutting it down and letting it get cold, you can't just close them in again, it just collapses. So that's one of the reasons, you don't want to shut furnace down.
Amplifying on the gas the right way.
Yeah. So in this chain, it's produced sound. So it's without any fault.
What's the hook thing, Greg?
So the hooks on the frame there were the gatherer blown with up the blow irons, and the 7 of them right on the floor. And we've got a few outside as well that we've salvaged, so to keep those, How are we doing today, Carol?
You okay there? I'll just...
Okay, so as I say, steps down, do be careful as you're coming in. There's nothing really to grab hold of, so if you need assistance, just let me know. Are you okay to all come in now? Yeah? Yeah, if you want to, I think we've got quite a big group now.
Do you know this side of where we've just been, where as you come down the ramp, there's a door?
Or on the right?
Out. Yes.
Yeah. So that was I was going to touch on. I'm glad you brought that up. I'll let everybody get in. A couple of things you'll see above your head. This is a central maintenance tunnel. So this was situated where we were stood earlier under the cone. You are now stood under that area. So the furnace was above our heads. One of the things I mentioned upstairs was that furnaces require a lot of maintenance to the furnace bottom. This tunnel was designed to allow maintenance to it. You can see through the various arches, you can see the concrete floor. That timber that you can see, those bits of elm mouldy timber, was the actual original shuttering that was put down when the tank was removed so that they could lay the concrete base on top of it. There would have been the reason that timber had to go down for the concrete base to go on was because these were, as I say, access to the furnace floor, so the furnace bottom. So when the furnace was removed, they were open to the cone. Each area between the arches was open to the cone. So they had to put that shuttering down to lay the concrete base. This lady asked me as we went down the ramp, there was an opening to your right, don't know whether anybody saw it, and I'm glad she brought that up because I forgot to mention that in 1939 when war broke out with Germany, the tunnels and vaults down here were used as an air raid shelter for the works population and the domestic dwellings that were around here. You've got to remember this was a very different landscape back in the day when Cannington was operating a furnace here. Lots of small houses around the plant as well as the people who worked here. So it was used as an air raid shelter in 1939 to 1945 when Hitler was sending his bombers over. We gave him a good stuffing and all, didn't we, in the end? So the stairs that you saw to your right, they were put in 1939 to give easier access to these tunnels and whatnot. So we're hoping, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we want to do in a bit, but we're hoping that we'll be able to preserve that as well. Maybe it's a good time to tell you a little bit about where we are at the minute with it. So about 3 years ago, I managed to secure, along with Caroline, who's somewhere at the back there, 1.3 million in funding from the Towns Fund. I was chair of the Town Deal Board at the time, and we'd secured 25 million for various projects in the town. And I managed to get 1.3 million allocated to start work on this. We also were very fortunate to get £250,000 from Heritage Lottery for the Heritage Skills Academy. So that allowed us to bring apprentices on here from the local college, and they could learn about traditional heritage construction skills like lime mortaring. When you regenerate an historic asset like this, you can't use modern materials of the day. You can in certain circumstances, but in order to as much as possible, you've got to use the materials and techniques of the day it was built. So everything we've done here is reclaimed bricks, about 95% reclaimed bricks, and it's lime mortaring, which is a skill in itself, a lot more difficult to work than modern day mortar is. So we've used that opportunity to bring apprentices from the college to site, and they've learned that as part of their apprentice lime mortaring and traditional skills. We've all created 2 apprenticeships now through it with the company that we used on site, so we're really pleased about that, what we've done with the Heritage Skills Academy, you know. In terms of what we've done with the building, you will have, when we were upstairs on the furnace floor, that was just a jungle. It literally was impenetrable with weeds and everything else that was going in. The trees, mature trees, were growing on the furnace floor, you know. So it's amazing what we've managed to do there. We've restored all the ironworks. You saw they're all red painted now. We've had structural surveys done, all sound, no problems with them, but we nevertheless had a lot of surface oxidisation on the iron. So we had all that blasted, cleaned up, and treated, re-primed and repainted. The cone itself, the top third was all but collapsing. and we've rebuilt that again using reclaimed brick. So it's a great advert for sustainability and a circular economy, what we've done on site. We have bought very little in the way of new material. And that's great, because one of the theories with, and it's a very good theory, one of the theories with old buildings, if you can repair them using the materials that are there and put them back into use, then you've captured that carbon in the building. You're not allowing it to exhaust to atmosphere and exacerbating climate change. So we're really pleased with what we've done with that as well, you know. As I said, this is central maintenance tunnel, allowed the maintenance to the furnace bottoms. I mentioned upstairs that the bottle shop is a glass making engine, and if we just want to go down here, I'll show you one of these as well. Now this is a little difficult to you because it can move forward. Sorry, it's a little cramped, I'm sorry about that. I don't know whether you can all just squeeze in, it's a little bit of a cramped area, or maybe you want to do it in 2 batches.
Sorry, it's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're okay then. So I'll bring you guys in a sec. You know, what you're looking at here are the regenerator tunnels. So the one nearest the maintenance tunnel, that one that you've just walked past, is the gas regenerator, and this is the air regenerator. These tunnels, when they were in operation, would have been filled with a honeycomb of bricks. You remember I mentioned upstairs that those bricks that were laid 90 degrees to each other with air gaps through. Air and gas would enter them, they'd be extremely hot. A gas would enter that one, air would enter this one and flow through. And if you just let me pass them, it's okay. There are various areas here, 4 of them, where that preheated air would go up in through those flues that are mentioned, either side of the furnace and into the furnace. And it would be the same with the gas one next door. The gas would flow up there, through those flues and into the furnace.
And would they go in with in those little square things that are on the wall?
No. Where they went in, the furnace, the tank, the box that was there, if you remember, is gone, long gone now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, did everybody hear that? Or
I'm just going to say, John, your next tour starts shortly.
Start when you're there, won't you?
We'll bring you some throat sweets.